and we'll be recommending a number of charges. Just another update on an aggravated assault. So in March of this year, 2 suspects chased an individual into Burquitlam SkyTrain station and then slashed him in the head with a machete. So both suspects have been arrested, and in August, as a result of a thorough investigation carried out by our GRU, the suspect has pled guilty to all charges, including aggravated assault. Our Crim Intel unit has been, again, working a lot with our CIU counterparts throughout the LMD. We hosted the multi-jurisdictional offender meeting on September 8th, and we had 30 people attend to that. And we also worked a lot with DPD, CIU, on several events, but in particular the Canada Day events and the Pride Parade events. So it was nice to work with them. Our crime suppression team continues with their proactive work in and around the transit system. One alternative means of disruption is referring assets found in possession of drug dealers to BC Civil Forfeiture's office. And we recently received word that 4 of our referrals were successfully concluded by that office, resulting in seizure of significant dollar amount in terms of money and vehicles. And since the last board meeting, our Crim Intel unit has been working with our crime suppression team in identifying an individual who we've dubbed the Nation Tagger, and he's responsible for a number of taggings and graffiti to transit property over the last few months, and overtly presenting himself in front of our camera system. So we've identified him, we've put a report to Crown Counsel for recommending several charges, and we're just attempting to locate him for the purposes of arresting him. And those are basically the highlights from me.
Okay, Suzanne?
Good morning, everyone. I'll be giving the update on the operational support section. For community engagement team, I've got 3 updates. Looks like we've been hosting a bit. We yesterday had the opportunity to host the BC Diversity Law Enforcement Network, and that group meets quarterly, and they really talk about DEI initiatives and how we move them forward. So we had 15 organizations represented, and we were really pleased to be able to host that. And that particular diversity network we actually have been a member of since 2018. The second update, many of you are aware of Sergeant Cheryl Simpson. She is going to be going on a 1-year secondment to TransLink in their Indigenous Relations section, and really an excellent opportunity for Cheryl, but as well for us, because as she continues in that more strategic role, she still will be supporting us with moving Indigenous focused things forward in the organization. So congratulations to her on that opportunity. And that brings me to thirdly, the Blue Eagle program. And our ILO, Kirk Rattray, who's been leading that program, that was his vision for that program from the onset. We're really excited as we get going this September in the cohorts. In Vancouver, we look like we have 20 youth registered and 34 in Surrey, which is an increase of last year, so we continue to just build on that program. Also excited, other agencies expressing their interest. New West is going to be having an open house in December and looking to have their own in the new year, so they've got participants signed up and looking forward to having more. And then finally, I'll just share, we've had other agencies reach out who are quite interested as well, so we have secured that trademark around the Blue Eagle program. And I'll just move over to the Canine Unit briefly, and I know a lot's been said about Gord and that unit and leadership. And I'll just share with you the dog name badge ceremony that we spoke about kind of at the last meeting. They will be going, so Constable Bazzi and Chopper to meet with the Masalis family for the Celebration of Light happening this weekend. And they've also received, and we've received a personal invitation to meet with the family. So we'll look forward to engaging in that. And I will turn it over to Deputy Cumberworth for administrative update.
Thank you, Suzanne. It's hard enough following the operations update, but I'm really glad I'm not following Gord. He's such a great ambassador, regionally, nationally, and internationally. And it's fabulous to have him leading that unit. So from Human Resources, our promotional process is now underway for the staff sergeant process. There's 3, possibly 4 positions, and the selection of the candidates for staff sergeant will then determine how many sergeant vacancies there are, and then the subsequent competition. So we anticipate having the selection process wrapped up and underway by October. The pulse check is now complete. The results are very similar to 2021, the 2021 morale survey. The main themes that continue to be from the recent survey is resources and supervisory support. So we continue to actively work these particular areas so that we can make more improvements. The HR and Compensation Committee will receive a summary of the pulse check at the next meeting coming up. The first 3 contract constables have been hired. So contract constables, by that I mean experienced members from another department who is retired and seeking to continue on in policing. Once they go through a hiring process, we will sign them up for a 5-year contract. So we've hired the first of 3. We've capped that at 8 so that we can spread it out throughout operations, ideally 2 per squad. We continue to trial the UBC Leadership Training Program by sending supervisors, middle managers, and senior leaders. We'll review this program at the end of this year and we'll encourage participant feedback so that we can decide to continue whether or not we continue in 2023. From IT, Wi-Fi has been upgraded at Waterfront and Bridgeport. This will just provide our members with strong... Oh, did something happen when I'm gone? Did it crash? I'll move on. I sense the story there. QFA has been rolled out to employees requiring access to pay stubs through PeopleSoft when they're using their personal computers. And in the process of rolling out 2FA for webmail as well, and that should be completed by Q4 of this year. And then IT has also implemented a pilot project where it provides standby support on the weekends, and this is in support of our members, and then we'll review this at the end of the year and decide whether or not to continue for next year. We have included it in the budget because we sense that based on the support so far, that has been very successful. From finance, several external factors beyond our control have affected or will affect the 2022 budget, and this includes JIBC increased tuition, which is retroactive to May of this year. This will not only affect our 2022 budget, but it will also affect next year's budget submission. Also affecting our budget this year is the federal statute. Special event overtime, namely celebration of lights in July, August, and then continued high fuel prices. Again, this weekend we're seeing fuel prices going up, and high maintenance costs for maintaining our vehicles. Again, just because of the delay in new vehicles. Our proposed 2023 budget previously submitted to the board was $45.9 million, which was a 12.4% increase over the 2022 budget of $40.8 million. The 2023 budget that we submitted to TransLink is now $46.9 million, which is a $1 million increase, or a 14.8% increase over 2022. Why the increase? Well, the $1 million difference is related to updated labor assumptions to align with TransLink's global assumptions, increased cost of JIBC tuition fees, which is increased from $15,000 per recruit to $22,000, and this begins in January classes. Also included shift premiums, staff holidays, premiums, and IT standby costs. Updated timing of new recruit classes from July to May as per the JIBC class schedule, and also, as I said before, updated fuel increase to align with TransLink's assumption on gasoline prices. Also, or finally from support services, and I should say that Inspector Brett Spring is here. Chief, has he been introduced to the board yet? He was, okay.
You weren't? No. Okay, we will.
So Inspector Bryce Graham is leading our support services section. Bryce came back from CFSU where he was on secondment as a staff sergeant in a leadership position. Bryce competed in the inspectors competition, was successful, and has taken over. He's doing fantastic in support services. I'll just provide a brief update, and then Bryce, feel free to jump in. So from support services, this came from Bryce anyway, so I'm just saying what he sent me. The training unit delivered Cycle 3 training, which focused on firearm skills building, and also delivered the core patrol policing course for our new recruits and lateral hires. The recruiting unit completed 4 recruit hiring packages, and that's simple to say, but there's so much work that goes into a hiring package, from background checks to psychological reports to medical to interviews and so on. Many countless hours by a number of members in the recruiting unit to put a successful package forward, and there's checks and balances in that process before it even passes Bryce's eyes. It must meet a certain standard before it gets to mine and then to the chief. So kudos to the training unit for the 4 recruit packages put forward, as well as pre-contract policing packages, and all were subsequently approved at the executive level. The renovation to construct the new women's locker room has been completed and is now occupied. The renovation for the remainder of the space that we acquired is underway. The initial timeline was completion of November, but we bumped that to December just to address some additional things coming up. But very much looking forward to the completion of that. We received approval for funding to purchase 2 new vehicles that suddenly became available because the original buyer no longer required them. So this was great news for us because in obtaining their approval to purchase them this year, we saved a significant amount of money if we were to purchase those same vehicles next year. And then finally, with the installation of the fingerprint machine at headquarters here, all fingerprinting can be performed at this site as opposed to offloading this service to our jurisdictional police partners. And that's it. Feel free.
Just really quick, Bryce Graham. Thanks, Nick. Meet everybody. I know I've met a bunch of people in this room kind of previously. Been with Transit Police since 2007, kind of like was previously stated. I just finished the comment with the RCMP at the Combined Forces Special Enforcement Unit, so very excited to be back in my new role.
Yes, I thought we introduced you at the last meeting here, Bryce, but my apologies.
I was willing to let it slide.
I'm talking about my age, right? Just introduce Bryce, who heads up the Human Resources and Training at the Inspector under Mike's supervision here. Areas. He is a long-time, dedicated transit police officer, has made his way up through the system here and has a lot of experience. And coming back from CFSU, Combined Forces Unit, where he was involved with the uniform gang teams, and he oversaw that as in his role as a staff sergeant. So he represented us very well and demonstrated a lot of skills, obviously, that we were in the midst of some serious crimes occurring throughout the province, and particularly the Lower Mainland, and had to manage a lot of resources and projects and quick changes, I would say, on the fly as to what was happening there. So really happy to have back. And Bryce also carries the thing. He is a former president of the Transit Police Unit. So we're ripping all that knowledge out of him.
Good to have you. Thank you. That was a lot. I'm busy trying to keep up here. Does anybody have any comments or questions?
A quick question, maybe, Karen, to get the schedule for the community council meetings again. We were taking turns as board members attending.
Yeah.
So to have that info again, that would be great, so we can start to do that post-COVID.
I'll have there next year in early November. We've had Murray come to our meeting this month.
Great.
But, yeah, and I'll get the new note.
It's always sort of astounding how much is going on.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes we don't realize it. And so you put it all together, because it's happening around you, right? There's a lot happening.
Yeah.
And when you start to put it together, you understand just how much has occurred or is actually occurring.
And
right?
how much work is being done with jurisdictional partners, which I heard sort of threaded throughout everything that it was saying. And, you know, I think we really want to take a lead from you, George, to sort of acknowledge that and thank you. It's so important the safety of the system and the safety of the region, that we've got those relationships and that continuing to build them is really great. And just coming out of COVID is just so hard, and to keep having those meetings is really great.
And we did want to point out that the toughest decision over the last 3 months is when that invitation came in to go to Paris, and we thought it was Paris, Ontario. And senior management team, we were invited as an agency, and very specific to a program, that we didn't quite catch it, so we assigned it to Julian, and then we all realized it was Paris.
Oh, right. Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
Julian, it's very specific.
It's really great. It's really good for him to, and that program is fantastic, the community program that he's developed. It's amazing.
And once again, he's sponsored to come on behalf of the organization, is sponsoring him, the costs associated with Julian's travel.
Right, well,
Yeah, it's good though.
he's done good work
Yeah.
down there, for
Oh,
sure.
he's done excellent work.
Yeah.
He's the right person.
And if Cheryl Simpson is being seconded, what's happening with the work that she does here?
We're in we have an actor in place
Okay.
right now, which is Bruce Shipley.
Okay.
And as Mike alluded to, we're right in the process of our promotion process. So then we'll be identifying who will be the permanent sergeant in that.
Okay.
And part of this is not a loss of our access to Indigenous programming events and that. It is capitalizing, because we have a sergeant who does it. TransLink has 2 people who do it. And they're always working together in concert with each other and feeding off each other. So the plan here is we're putting them all together, and under this model, it's a secondment where Cheryl's wages will now be charged to another department in terms of it. So we not only have access to Cheryl, we have access to Alana and the third party who's in there,
Mm-hmm.
and it allows us still to carry on with the sergeant and the community engagement team, because if you've heard presentations on things such as homelessness, the neighborhood police officers and that. So it actually expands perhaps our resource base for the Indigenous programming, while allowing us to dedicate and focus even on other programs that are going on. And of course, we retain Kirk Rattray, Constable Rattray, as running the Blue Eagle program and our Indigenous liaison officer.
I guess we're moving on now. Does anybody else? Okay. Item 3, other business. So 3.1 is the board report update on the strategic plan. So, Stephen, ready? You got all?
I'm good.
Not occupied with fixing the
I'm
mic?
not. We are back up and running.
You're good, okay.
So as reflected in the report that's part of the public package, the team's been very active in terms of moving forward a variety of actions underneath the 11 objectives and the 35 actions contained within the plan. Given this is the first 6-month report for the 5-year plan, many of those items you will notice are in process, so kind of in the very early stages of being initialized. But obviously more information will be forthcoming on those later on this year. When compared to previous strat plan reports, one thing you will note as a change is we've moved key performance indicators to the very beginning of the report as part of the executive summary. We also color-coded the year-over-year changeover in order to indicate those items that are trending in a positive direction, those that we still need close attention, and those that really need immediate action. The intent behind this is that even though we're giving you a 30-plus page report, any board member should be able to take a look at the report and within 2 minutes tell me, okay, what are the key items I need to be asking questions about, and what is the transit agency doing to address that? So we may still be working a little bit on the format of future reports. That's ultimately the goal for working language. Some of the comments on the KPIs I'll just make contained within. The majority of these key performance indicators are new. They didn't carry forward from previous plans, so they have required a fair amount of work at the outset to establish associated back-end basically processes and procedures to collect the data and then report on them. And as much as possible, we're trying to automate that process. So even though we're only going to be reporting on these on a 6-month basis, we want to be able to review this data potentially like on a monthly basis as a senior management team, because that allows us to identify issues early and then also action them. So that is taking a little bit of work at the outset. There obviously is one KPI within this plan that's detailed fairly extensively on page 7, a lot of the work that's gone into it. That just gives a little bit of an indication about some of the work going on in the back end to establish these KPIs. When I look at that new KPI, the crime rates at key transit hubs, the first step that was actually received by the chief, going to TransLink CEO earlier this year, was just to get us additional information on ridership data by station. So we do get information from TransLink about ridership growth as a whole across the system and by mode, but to actually get very, very specific data where we're saying, okay, we want to draw a 250-meter radius around the station and we want to know ridership data for this period for all modes of transit, takes a fair amount of work. And I know Patco and our analytics team have been working quite a bit with the TransLink Compass analyst just to ensure that that data is fitting the format we require to report on this in the future. Some of the KPIs will still only be reported on annually, and that's just due to the timing of data collection and reporting procedures. So an example of that would be the pulse check that was just conducted. So the pulse check data that you're seeing in this report will also be reflected in our year-end report, because we won't be collecting additional data until the more extensive employee morale survey is conducted next year. But by the end of the year, we will have data for all the KPIs. There are several enhancements that we will be looking to make to this report for the year end. So you're looking at a year-over-year changeover in terms of KPI data. We would like to include some 5-year trending analysis in the year-end report as well, and that just takes it away from the natural variability that happens between quarters. You don't want to get too focused on the change, every 6 months. You kind of want to look at what the long-term trend lines are showing you, so that will be embedded in the year-end report as much as we can with these KPIs. The other thing that will be included in the year-end report would be the action matrix for strengthening support for Indigenous peoples. You'll notice some of those actions are referenced in this report. We talk a lot about the initiatives that are underway with respect to reconciliation and the actions identified in that, but actually including that table that you've seen before as an appendices to the strat plan, I think is important. So that'll be another thing we'll be looking to add. If there's one action item that I feel really stands out amongst all the others, it's likely the increased turnover we're currently seeing amongst our sworn, amongst our police officers. And while that's obviously a concern, I think there's a few caveats to make on that. One is this is only 6 months of data, and that's a brand new KPI. So I think once we actually start to collect more data and have a full year of data, we'll get a better sense about if we're actually trending in the direction we think we are. But the other one is just reflecting back on the 2 years of planning we put into developing this plan. We knew that employee retention, particularly with officers, was going to be an issue. We were anticipating that, and we put actions within the plan to address it. So it's not a surprise. I think it's a concern, but it's not surprising anyone here, and we do have initiatives underway to improve our recruitment and retention efforts. I think overall the report's a really positive one. It shows a lot of early actions being taken in each of these areas. I'll open up to questions now, as I anticipate there'll be quite a number of questions on such a long report.
Thank you. So let's open the floor to questions. Murray.
I attended the Chiefs Community Council on Tuesday of this week, and one of the comments that was raised at that meeting was the question of safety, not just within SkyTrain stations or hubs, transit hubs, but the environs of transit hubs. And I think that's it was an interesting comment, because the overlap between police jurisdiction and jurisdictional police jurisdiction is kind of fuzzy around the station. So it's something that I'm not looking for a response, but raising it more as something that may need some attention, given the fact that the partners that are represented at the community council raised concerns around this issue of the environment of the station, not just the station itself.
Yeah, and so that is, and so Stephen alluded to it, one is us looking at what's the radius around that we should be. And so we look at, transit, if we call it jurisdiction, like on the system, in the stations, kind of ours for sure. And then as we move away, it blends into the jurisdictional, and there's that area we work together with on. And so we continue to do that with our policing partners in terms of what are the issues, but also that feeds back to this discussion with a meeting that Michelle Hansen, Acting Staff Sergeant Hansen, put on here with our partners, is what's the role of the STAs, what's the role of TransLink when it comes to SEPTED, and because there are things such as bike paths and parking lots, and as development of the transit system goes, you know, major centers, housing and commercial are being built either on or immediately adjacent to it. So this is requiring that bit of a change, like development of how do they see it? Because the public sees us visible and accessible, and making sure that, you know, we have that right collaboration and understanding of it. So when we go through, I just say a step of everything is, you know, if we see it, we're gonna deal with it, right? And then if we need to, we'll communicate with the jurisdictional partner as to who may carry on with it.
Right.
But we're going to address it at the very least, right? And if the jurisdictional partner isn't in a position to take care of it, then we make the decision that to perhaps hold it, keep it ourselves, and address it. And so you will see that. That is one of the big discussions as we go down the Broadway line, because it's subterranean, it's a subway, that's one issue. You know, so is there a greater separation because we actually have tar between us, or asphalt between where transit and there? And then as we go to Surrey Langley, which is another elevated, separated grade, what are those communities? So we're already meeting with like the Fleetwood communities and the policing agencies in those areas to talk about it, right up into including Langley, who seems to be excited of us coming to that area.
Takeaway from Tuesday's meeting was, you know, the group that was represented there, which there was probably 8 or 9 different organizations that were part of that meeting, were all very positive. Like they weren't down on the police, they were very encouraging that the police are doing the right thing. So from my perspective, it was an encouraging meeting, but also it's a good forum to pick up in some of these, subtle may not be the right word, but transitional areas where policing may become a little bit confusing because of the overlap between Metro Vancouver Transit Police and the jurisdictional agencies.
Yeah, and it's good to keep that dialogue going because it is important to understand the pulse of the community and how much they're feeling, and just to making sure that the work that we're doing, you know, to ensure safety and the partnerships and the jurisdictional relationships that we have with jurisdictional police are actually visible and also effective.
Yeah, and seamless in some respects.
Yeah, and it is challenging for sure, but it's good. I mean, doing the right things. So that's
22
good.
communities to go talk to.
22 communities, 1,800 square kilometers. Yeah. Anybody else have any comments? Yes, Bill.
Great. Thank you, Stephen. I think it's a great strategic update before it certainly provides the board and myself of the progress, and that's important that as we monitor the progress and whether we meet the strategic plan or not, or as we move this along the path, what things in the strategic plan that no longer works for us, and what these things that we need to look for. Looking forward to that in your subsequent reports. You did make a note that on your KPIs that you will add on later on, which is great. But on your KPIs, in reference to page 4 and 5, I wonder if you thought of, or if it was also a good idea to add a reference point on what some of those KPIs are compared to what I call pre-COVID in 2019. Because as you know, last year, this year is a bit of an unusual year, so it's hard to get the right footing on what the reference point is. So wondering whether that might be helpful. And the other point is that I don't see here clear enough that what is our KPI in our strat plan. For example, item number 1, what is our target KPI? I don't know that offhand, but what are you thought of putting that as a reference point?
Yeah, I think we've spoken before about having not like a specific target number, but more of a range. And when you move outside of that range, when you're looking historically the last 5 or 6 years, for instance, that's when it's something that becomes quite notable that we want to bring to the board's attention. Absolutely, you want to, I think, look at a longer-term analysis, and that's where that 5-year trend, it becomes really important, because when you look at against the crimes against persons and crimes against property, and you're looking at a 29% decrease and 39% decrease in the rate, it looks like it's really, really positive, and it is highlighted in green. But really all that's doing right now is returning us to our rate previous to COVID, because those rates increased quite substantially when ridership dropped over the last 2 years. And now that ridership is very quickly returning to the system, it's really just returning back to the mean of where we were pre-COVID. So positive story to see us going back to where we were a couple of years ago, because I think it's easier to compare where we are in terms of our long-term trajectory, but that doesn't necessarily reflect like a 40% drop in crimes against property. That's largely reflective of the increase in ridership.
And that's where, Chief Palmer had indicated perhaps there's a look, even in the other reporting, of raw numbers.
Of the volume as well.
Because we might have had 100 assaults, and we still have had 100 assaults. Just the ridership's gone up, so that number looks good because we're using that measurement as opposed to raw data. So that'll be something for us. And because this is the first kind of reporting out on this, then thanks, Bill, is that for us to tweak it and make sure it's getting right, so.
Thank you.
Yeah, George, and then Carl.
I was going to add to that point around the waste. I want to say thanks very much because it's amazing amount of work for just the first 6 months of the draft plan. And so it's so great to be operationalized, and so it's quite amazing. I just want to thank the whole team. It's incredible. And just on the point of how the data is reported, I'm using some percentages when you talk about, protection surveys of, their people safety. I'd like to see the numbers of how many people are in the surveying as opposed to just the 7. That hasn't changed, 77%. So just that context would be really helpful. So just it's the same point, but reporting all the data on some of it and just half the data from and some of the percentage. And we all know how sensitive percentages are to any sort of movement, especially when we're talking small.
Right.
And Georgia.
And my question was more around the distribution because it is a lot of work. It's got great information, as we talked before, about the breadth and depth of the work that's done. I know you said it's posted on the website, but is there like more of a proactive outreach of the materials? So does your community council folks, do they get a set of copy? Do you send out to, just wondering what kind of distribution to be able to, again, showcase some of the stuff rather than someone having to come to the website?
Yeah. It's interesting you mentioned the community council because Murray was there earlier this week, and we actually spoke about this. I said this report, very comprehensive report, going to our police board on Friday. Once they've received it in the public meeting, we'll be distributing it to all of our community council members. And then we also capitalize on the community engagement team to reach out to some of our other partners. And similar to how we distributed the strat plan when we first brought it forward in January, then distributing an update for them to read.
So my question is more around, is there any use in others, or is it the type of thing that's not going to be read or received, or just, again, a strategy around trying to get the information out about transit police and what is being done in a very broad way. So
I think part of it might focus because this is a semi-annual report, and when we do an annual report, it is usually widely distributed to all of our policing partners and our other partners. This semi-annual one, it's almost like, I want to say, not hitting them with too much, like every agency produces an annual report for their agency, and so this semi-annual keeps the board and our community partners and those directly involved, perhaps in the strategic planning and the initiatives, up to date on where we're at. And then the annual report gets a much wider distribution.
Does this go to the TransLink?
Yes.
To George's point, though, there probably is an opportunity you could send it out, like, if it is on your website, send the link out on social. So it's out there, and the general public would have access to it as well, if we know that it's out there.
Yeah, no, we can absolutely do that.
Other comments? Thank you for the hard work on this. It's been a heavy lift to get that strategic plan done, and then now to actually get it operationalized, and then start doing this reporting and figuring out how to do it. Well done, really good.
Yeah, I think it's exciting on a lot of people's part to kind of see the end result finally.
Yeah, and again, there's just so much happening. There's so much going on. There's so much to keep track of, and there's so much good work being done, and it's nice to see. It's nice to see that we can track it and we can talk about it and that it's out there for people to read if they want to. So thank you. And I know it's going to just keep getting better, and you're just going to keep honing the work and honing your methodologies. And so, yeah, good job. Next, item 3.2, report from the chair of the finance committee.
Chair. So the Finance Committee met on, what's the date?
July 26th.
Yeah, July 26th. So the regular meeting, the primary focus was the Q2 results. And so as a result of recruiting primarily early, the Q2 projections show that we'll have a deficit by year end. But it primarily relates to ensuring that we stay staffed properly during the course of the year. So at this point in time, the projection is that we'll come in somewhere between $400,000 and $500,000 deficit position by year end. But I know that the chief and the senior management team at the department are looking at ways in mitigating that as much as possible. So the context of that deficit, as I say, is primarily recruiting. There are some other offsets that the department has looked at of mitigating that deficit, and they all look very real and sustainable. So I'm satisfied that the department's doing the right job in relation to managing the budget relative to our needs in relation to delivering the policing service that we're responsible for. So, so that was the primary item that dealt with on the regular agenda, and I'll have more to say under the
Okay, thank you. Any questions? Okay. And the report from the Chair of the Governance Committee?
It's, as kind of stated in the material that's been handed out, I mean, the only thing that I want to highlight is this ongoing renewed goal of having the entire board continue its training around, we're hoping to do something about unconscious bias and conscious inclusion training in early 2023. And effectively, we've completed the working effectively with Indigenous peoples programs, as well as the training, the ongoing commitment of us as a board to be able to constantly get better. And it's all about good governance and the commitment of everybody to be involved in that. So we'll work back on that.
Okay, thank you. And ECOM update, and that's back to you, George.
Well, it's just an update with regards to the AGM, because I attended on June 23rd, which was the AGM for ECOM, in my first meeting.
Yeah.
Representing, and just again to kind of tie it all together, there's a syndicate, which is ourselves, Port Moody, Abbotsford, New Westminster, and West Vancouver sit on board. I'm representing. The governance itself is a bit of a struggle. Having been to my first board meeting, 22 people on the board. The only thing I've seen even close to that is the committee in the academic world. And we know how that works. But seriously, one of the challenges, it's all been very public, and I think later on we'll have probably a further discussion around some of this. At the AGM, they reported out 2.1 million calls were received this past year. Real challenge around call volumes. They had 8,000 calls one day, which was a call every 12 seconds, average call of 5,700. 92% of the 911 emergency calls were answered in 5 seconds or less, and the call volumes were up at 12%. The big issue that they caused the non-emergency calls, and it's a real struggle. It's a big problem. It affects the entire region, the entire province basically, because what they show is 63% of the calls for 911 are police, 31% for ambulance, 6% are fire department. So they've got staffing shortages, which is fairly significant for a lot of organizations. The non-emergency calls, and a very large deficit. And so there are some really major issues coming up. And I think the other thing that they talked about, which is maybe not been as front and center, is this federally mandated next generation 911 implementation that has to take place, which is going to be technologically challenging, but also a big cost. And a lot of our jurisdictional partners are going to get hit with some pretty significant bills coming that were unexpected on operational costs. And I think we'll hear about that generally in our community with other police boards, but also within the policing community. So, as I say, I think we're gonna hear probably from our chief and, our talk a little later on some of the other things that are happening. But I think there are some big issues out there that we just need as a board to be aware of, so that when it comes up in conversation, everybody's,
Right. Okay, thanks. So our last item is item 3.5, the CAPG annual conference. And Bill, you went to that conference?
Yes, thank you, and I'll be quick. I was fortunate that my colleague, Director Marie Dinwiddie, was also there virtually on the session, which was great. So certainly as a new member, it was a very informative 2.5 days of police governance. There was a wealth of knowledge to tap into. There were a lot of commonalities, a lot of board directors were there, a lot of the agencies were there, and the staff. It was very insightful for me to hear to the police officer's lens, the things that you guys see, like I don't see at all, and just spending that day with Sergeant Mike Bosa, there were things that he just saw instantly, which I had to think about, and I see it. So was it really kind of, I call eye-catching, obviously, but I think the collaboration was really nice, because there was the Victoria Police did a presentation and how they collaborated with the Ottawa Police, especially on the incident on the Freedom Truckers Convoy. They called it Truckers Convoy 2.0 in Ottawa, and replicated in Victoria, and just the collaboration and the intelligence sharing on that, make sure that it didn't happen in Victoria. It was successful, it did not happen in Victoria. So I think that was really good. And some real common governance structures among all these agencies, and it's nice to see and actually our maturity level, and whether our board is strategic or operational, and what level of curve we want to be in, and what we want to be as part of that. So there were many takeaways, but I'll just highlight 2 items. And there, I think one item was the creative ways on community engagement and partnership was something really I was intrigued on, especially these agencies using art and indigenous not-for-profit organizations to get that partnership going. And it really just added more support on our initiative to really advance our community safety officer program. So I think that was a really eye-opener too. The other item I was just mentioning, just the level of the protests that have been happening for a while, and how they leverage social media technology to advocate on this, and how they're so effective. I don't know enough for what our transit police does as far as to counter, and what our strategy is on counter, how they're being able to use social media, and how can we be effective in using social media to counter that. They seem to do it really well, and it's important that we stay on top of that, because of that. There's some protests that gain a lot of traction from them and were successful, and it's important that we kind of have that a little bit better, or be at the same level on the social media leverage, because that seems to be driving force. Those are some of the key points, very informative. I enjoyed it.
Good, thank you. Thank you. Does anybody else have anything they want to add? Okay, come to the end of the open portion of the meeting. And our next regular meeting of the